photographs on the walls of their houses, and they believed in things so wholeheartedly. The way they communicated online, it was a part of their tribal identity.
And it was also a tremendously entertaining, multi-actor online game too.
Yes.
You look for cues.
Yes.
Clues, you share them.
Yes.
If you find something that no one else has missed, then you're kind of a local hero. You get a lot of credit. Also, so this is a problem that I had to think about a lot when I wrote Rationality, because I'm a cognitive psychologist, and I, like everyone in my profession, I teach students about the gambler's fallacy. Like if there's a run of reds on a roulette wheel, people mistakenly think that a black is more likely. Whereas, of course, the roulette wheel has no memory, and each spin is independent. So anyway, I have a list of those fallacies. Then someone says, okay, well, now explain QAnon. And, the standard cognitive psychology textbook is not of much use in explaining such a, well-developed but bizarre set of beliefs. So part of what I came to in trying to make sense of this is, as you said, there's part of it is just building up a tribal identity, a set of sacred beliefs that just define your tribe. If you believe it, you're a member in good standing. If you doubt it, then you're some sort of traitor or heretic. So there is that. But another part of it is, it kind of depends what you mean by believe. That people, I think there are two kinds of belief. There's the kind of belief about the physical environment that the world that we live in, where you've got to be in touch with reality, because reality gets the last word. Reality is what doesn't go away when you stop believing in it. That's a quote from Philip K. Dick, the science fiction writer. And even the people who believe in the weirdest conspiracy theories, they hold a job, a lot of them, and they pay their taxes, and they get the kids clothed and fed and off to school on time. They're not like psychotic. They obviously are in touch with cause and effect in the real world. Like if your car is out of gas, it's not going to move. You've got to understand that if you want to drive, and people do understand it.
Yeah.
Wishful thinking is not going to make your car go if there's no gas in the tank, and the vast majority of people know that. They're not going to say, well, I'd be really upset if the car didn't go when there's no gas in the tank, so therefore I'm going to believe that it will go. I mean, people don't believe that. Reality really is a pretty good check in the world of day-to-day cause and effect. But then there's this whole other realm of things that, you will never get to know, like what goes on in the White House and in corporate boardrooms, and what happened at the origin of the universe, and what happens, and why do bad things happen to good people and vice versa, these kind of cosmic questions, where I think the sense of most people is, that's a different kind of belief. You can't find out, no one knows. So I'm going to believe things that are interesting, that are morally uplifting, that convey the right message. Whether they're, true or false, you can't find out. No one knows. What difference does it make? And there's a whole set of beliefs that fall into that category of kind of more mythology than reality. Religious beliefs. That's why we say people hold things on faith, because you don't demand evidence that Jesus was the Son of God or that God created heaven and earth. You take it on faith. Sometimes some of our national founding myths, every country believes that it was founded by a generation of heroes, of martyrs, of great men. And then, the annoying historians come along and they say, well, yeah, but, Jefferson kept slaves, and, the greatest generation in World War II, they were kind of, racist, and they, killed civilians and, bombed innocent people too. And, we don't want to hear that. We want to think that our side, our heroes are really heroic. So, and when it comes to some of these conspiracy theories, I suspect that a lot of them fall into this category of mythological beliefs rather than reality-based beliefs. So if someone says, I believe that Hillary Clinton ran a child sex ring out of the basement of a pizzeria, what they're really saying is, I believe that Hillary Clinton is so depraved, that's the kind of thing she could have done. Or even just, Hillary, boo. That's kind of what the belief amounts to. And it's not clear how factually committed most of them are. I took an example from another cognitive psychologist, Hugo Mercier, who noted that one reaction of Pizzagate believer was to leave a 1-star Google review to the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria. He said the pizza was incredibly underbaked and there were some men looking suspiciously at my son. Now, that's not the kind of thing you do if you literally thought that children were being raped in the basement. You'd call the police. And there was one guy, Edgar Welch, who did, come into the pizzeria with his guns blazing in a heroic attempt to rescue the children.
Yeah.
At least he really did believe it. He then, recanted. He realized that he had been duped. But the most people who say they believe it in a kind of different sense than we believe that there's coffee in that cup or that it's going to rain today. It's a whole different mindset of belief. It's belief for the purpose of expressing the right moral values.
Yes.
And, did it happen? Did it not happen? Yeah, no one knows.
Expressing the beliefs of the tribe.
Yeah, expressing the moral values of the tribe.
Yeah. And that tribe in particular is it's extremely exciting to a lot of the people that are a part of it. And one of the things that you see in the documentary is like people got their families involved. Like one couple, their child was like chanting like "build that wall." Like they had this idea that what they were doing was the right thing, and that what they were doing was really going to save the world. And it was very exciting. It's the same thing that I always say about UFOs and Bigfoot. It's that, like, the belief that it's real is so interesting. It's so fun. It's so fun to believe that it's real.
Yeah.
And what you said about QAnon is that it's kind of an online game. And I think that was part of the fun of it. It's like, if Q really had information, well, fucking say it, man. Tell us what's going on. What's with these cryptic drops?
Well, it's just like those Hollywood movies where you've got the serial killer who deliberately leaves tantalizing clues to the police. Like,
but what about
mysteries.
real killer? The Zodiac killer did that for real.
Well, I guess they
never caught him.
That's true. But most of them don't deliberately leave little clues. And
quite a few of them do. Quite a few serial killers do deliberately
leave misleading clues. Like
there's
mysteries?
a psychological aspect of it that I'm surprised that you don't know about. They think that a lot of them somehow or another want to be caught, and the more time goes on, the more things where they don't get caught, they become more and more risky, and they make more and more mistakes.
Well, that I do know. Yes, that they do. They at first it's like a real, kind of scary thrill. Then when they get away with it, they want an even bigger thrill next time. And
they
feel,
want to cut it close to the edge as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
And they think there's also an aspect of it where they want to get caught. It's for some of them, right? Some of them.
That I wasn't.
It's speculative, right? I mean, some of them do say when they got caught, I was wondering what took you so long. But
well, they do take bigger and bigger chances to see what they can get.
Well, the Unabomber is a great example of that, right? Like the Unabomber, he left very odd clues to what he did, and even wrote this like very bizarre manifesto that eventually was his downfall,
right,
because his brother
recognized the
was like,
ranting.
I know that kind of crazy. But I mean, he put it out there. I mean,
I don't know if he wanted to get caught.
No, maybe not. Yeah, maybe not.
I think he really had this important message that the world had to understand.
Do you ever pay attention to the story behind him?
A little bit. He was a Harvard graduate.
He was also part of the Harvard LSD studies.
Oh, that's right. Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert.
They cooked that fellow's brain.
Maybe.
I think they did.
Well, I also was particularly attentive to it because I could have been a target. He was sending letter bombs to popular science writers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And at one point, I actually got a package that looked suspicious. I was at MIT at the time. So I called in the MIT police, as I was instructed to do, and everyone was afraid who would be his target. It was, had all these postage stamps, string, from someone I recognized. We got stern warnings from the MIT police. If you want to open a suspicious package, call the police. So I did. And I expected the bomb squad to come with like plexiglass shields and pincers. So the police took the package out of my office. And then 2 seconds later, the door knocked. They just opened the package.
Maybe they sent some cop in that nobody liked. Hey, Mike, Go open that package. That's hilarious. There's a great documentary about Ted Kaczynski that's on Netflix. And it goes into detail. His brother goes into detail about his childhood. And one of the aspects, besides the Harvard LSD study that he was involved with, he had a disease when he was young, and they separated him from his family as an infant for long periods of time, where they put him in this infirmary and in this hospital setup. No one touched him, no one held him, and he cried and screamed, and it went on for months. And they think that it really negatively affected his psychological development, and that it's part of this lack of empathy and this lack of connection that he had to other people was a direct result of his experiences as an infant hospitalized. Because it was like for months and months at a time, his family didn't get to see him. No one touched him.
Sort of like the orphans in the Romanian orphanages during the Ceausescu era.
Yes. And he's very different than his brother. His brother...
his brother's a normal guy, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And his brother who turned him in was detailing all the instances in Ted Kaczynski's life where he realized, like, he's really a problem. Like, if a woman rejected his advances, he would write horrible, evil letters to her and do things to sabotage her and just go out of his way to try to attack her. And he realized, like, Jesus Christ, my brother is a real fucking psycho.
Right. And, literally.
Literally. And then once the bombing started happening, I think he probably had a notion, like, geez, this could be my brother. And then when he read the manifesto, he's like, I think it's him.
Right. Yeah. No,
crazy,
it's an amazing,
right?
Amazing story. Yeah.
Psychology is so fascinating because the way the mind works and the way the mind can be manipulated with cults and with religions and with ideologies and beliefs. My friend Bridget Fetisi, who has a great she's got a few great podcasts, but she was interviewing this guy who became a jihadist, this blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy who got sucked in to the ideology of these jihadists and became one of them. And now he, unradicalized himself, got free of it all, I don't know exactly how he did it. She was just explaining to me on the phone last night, but now works to try to help people escape these situations. But it's almost like a disease of the mind where people get trapped into this certain very rigid way of thinking, and they refuse to believe that what they're thinking is incorrect.
Yeah, it is. Or it's kind of like a matrix where they often, cults and terrorist cells will befriend a lonely person. They'll simulate all the experiences of a family. They'll often say, we're your family now. We're a band of brothers, and use kinship metaphors. They'll and religious cults do this too.
Yeah.
There are a lot of lonely, alienated people out there, and then you suddenly provide them with a warm, loving family and a sense of purpose. Then you combine that with the fact that our own rationalization powers, and I distinguish rationalization from rationality, but we're all to some extent intuitive lawyers. That is, we can use our brain power to find the best possible argument for some position that we're committed to. It's called motivated reasoning, and it's another big source of irrationality, even among smart people, sometimes especially among smart people.
NFL fans, the fantasy football season doesn't just start in September. Every week is a new shot to win big cash prizes at DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. And this week, new customers can play free for millions with their first deposit. Don't sit on the sidelines. Get in the game. Playing daily fantasy football is simple. Just pick your lineup of NFL stars while staying under the salary cap and score enough points to bring home cash. And with a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes, you'll feel the NFL action like never before. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings app now and use promo code ROGAN to play free for millions. That's right. Enter promo code ROGAN to get a free shot at millions in total prizes with your first deposit. Don't miss out. Download DraftKings and play the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details.
We are brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. You love coffee, you love America. Well, Black Rifle Coffee Company is the veteran-owned coffee company that serves premium coffee to patriots the whole world over. Featuring explosive roast profiles sourced from high-quality coffee beans out of South America, this coffee is roasted with mission-like focus 5 days a week in Manchester, Tennessee, and Salt Lake City, Utah. Along with every purchase you make, they give back. In 2020, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. Why go to the store when you can receive special discounted pricing on roasts and gain access to exclusive products, member-only content, and partner discounts, and more when you join the Black Rifle Coffee Club? Your chosen brew is roasted, packaged, and delivered free to your door on your schedule. It is the only coffee I drink at home and at the studio. Purchase at www.blackriflecoffee.com/Joe Rogan and use the code Joe Rogan at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Yeah, it's very disturbing when smart people get locked into these rigid ideologies where they won't examine new evidence. It drives me crazy because I have very intelligent friends that hit these sort of roadblocks, and you want to say, "Hey, man, this is not." You're looking at it the wrong way.
It's so true. So that's another frequently asked question that I get is rationality the same thing as intelligence? And to the extent we can measure them separately, they correlate. On average, smarter people are more rational. When I say more rational, I mean less vulnerable to standard cognitive fallacies, like the gambler's fallacy, like the sunk cost fallacy. Better able to estimate risk and probability and chance and logical fallacies. So they kind of correlate, but not perfectly. There's an awful lot of smart, irrational people out there, and especially when you have a smart person who gets locked onto a belief that's close to his or her identity, then of course you can muster the best lawyerly skills to defend it. So it shows that what makes us rational as a species and as a country isn't so much that we've got some hyper-rational geniuses. It's that we form these communities where different people can check each other's irrationality. In the same way that the whole basis of democratic government is, this goes back to the framers and the founding fathers, that everyone wants power and everyone has too much ambition, and if you let someone get too much power, for sure they'll abuse it. So the trick is you have one person's power that checks another person's power. Ambition counters ambition. You have checks and balances and branches of government. So likewise, when it comes to ideas, what's to prevent someone with their brilliant theory of the whole explains everything, but they're really out to lunch, but they're very capable of defending it.
Right.
Well, you throw them in a community where they've got to defend it to other people, and other people get to pick holes in it. That's what makes us rational. So in science, you've got peer review. In journalism, at least in theory, you have freedom of the press, you've got editing, you've got fact-checking. You can't just say anything you want. You've got a whole community of people that try to keep you in touch with reality so that one person's cleverness doesn't get out of hand.
Well, I think one of the things that's contributing to today's infatuation with conspiracy theories is that some of them are real. That's one of the things that drives these QAnon people crazy. Like, for instance, like when the Hunter Biden laptop story gets censored by Twitter, and they won't allow the New York Post's link to the article to be posted on Twitter because there's a concern that people, because this was right before the election.
Yes, right.
People would read into this and decide to reelect Trump. And that's a real conspiracy. That's real.
I guess. I mean, it was a ham-fisted move, but it wasn't the kind of diabolical conspiracy involving hundreds or thousands of people keeping an amazing secret, like, for example, if the Twin Towers were demolished by implosion. It's a different order of conspiracy.
It is, but it is a conspiracy. There's clearly a bunch of people that conspired to keep evidence from the general public. They wanted to make sure that evidence wasn't easily distributed, because this idea that you could put something up on Facebook or on Twitter and then it catches fire and then it gets shared by millions of people, and we know that some of the information that gets shared like that is incorrect and is done by foreign entities in order to sow distrust into our political system. And that's what the whole Internet Research Agency is in Russia, that Rene DeResta has written about. And they've that was one of the things that they encountered recently, is that 19 of the top 20 Christian sites on Facebook were run by a troll farm in Macedonia.
That's amazing. Yeah,
isn't that wild?
That is
so
wild.
these are real conspiracies.
Yeah. No,
like some
true.
conspiracies,
conspiracies
are
do exist.
Yeah,
and in fact, there's a sense in which our going back in our evolutionary history, the biggest threat of aggression was in the form of conspiracies rather than full frontal attacks. Because if you look at tribal warfare, it's not two sides like on a football field chucking spears at each other. I mean, they do that, but not that many people get killed. It's almost more for show. But where the body counts really get racked up are in pre-dawn raids and in stealthy ambushes. And so I give an example from the Yanomama, the one of the indigenous peoples of the Amazon rainforest, where the villages are often at war with each other. And one village invited another one over for a feast. And at the end of the feast, when everyone was kind of full and kind of drunk, then on cue, the hosts kind of pulled out their bows and arrows and battle axes and killed all the guests on cue.
So like the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, right. So that exists, and that's what people were vulnerable to. So I suspect you're right in that a certain openness to the possibility of conspiracies came about because there really were conspiracies in our history. But
not just our history, right? Don't you think they're happening right now?
Not on the scale of chemtrails or QAnon. I mean, that would, if you think of the number of people that would have to successfully cooperate.
Well, the chemtrail one is just a total misunderstanding, like a lack of understanding of what happens when a jet engine encounters condensation.
Exactly. But the 9/11 truther conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
The number of people that would have to be to maintain like the equivalent of a non-disclosure agreement for decades, with no one leaking it, and everyone being perfectly silent, perfectly coordinated, that kind of defies common sense.
Well, there's also a lack of understanding of eyewitness accounts of things too. Like people say, eyewitness people said that they saw this and heard that. The problem with any traumatic experience is eyewitness accounts are often highly inaccurate.
Oh, you tell me about it. I mean, that's one of the main findings in cognitive psychology from Elizabeth Loftus at UC Irvine, who has shown in experiments that people confidently remember seeing things that never happened.
Yes. Well, they're very easily convinced. Like, it's one of the problems with eyewitness testimony. It's
that is her discovery. Absolutely, that a lot of innocent people have been convicted based on eyewitness testimony, especially not only when they're coached, but especially after the fact. The more often they're asked to affirm what they saw, the more confident they get whether it was true or not.
Yeah,
and the fact that I distinctly remember this, I saw it with my own eyes, means nothing in terms of whether it really happened, because we can confidently remember things that never took place.
That's the thing too, the coaching aspect of it is very disturbing, because you can plant memories in a person's head that were not real.
Oh, easily. Yes.
It's so the mind is so fucked. Like I've talked to people about this before. I've said, like, how much of your childhood how good's your memory? And people go, oh, my memory's great. I go, let me tell you something. You think your memory's great. I go, my memory's pretty good. It's really good when it comes to, like, I can say things that I remember and quote things and remember numbers and stuff like that. But if you ask me, could I give you a detailed account of yesterday? Yesterday is a blurry slideshow to me. Like, I've got a few images. I think I remember where I parked my car. I think I went in that door. I think my dog was there. I remember petting him, kind of. I remember a few things. but I don't have like an HD video that I can roll of my entire day and
no
back
way.
it up to. But some people like to pretend that they do.
Right. And we know that they don't. And there's certain tricks that we know our memory plays on us, such as we tend to kind of retrospectively edit our memories to make a good story, often that puts us at the center of historic events.
Yes.
So, a lot of people remember, people my generation, remember seeing John F. Kennedy assassinated on live TV. Now, there wasn't live TV.
Right, ever.
People remember the Arthur Zapruder 8mm home movie, which was only made public weeks later.
No. It wasn't even released to the public 13 years later.
Oh, well, in frames, maybe it was just frames.
Well, it was just photographs, but
stills from
the video was released on Geraldo Rivera's television show by Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory brought the video to Geraldo Rivera's.
Comedian and activist?
Yes.
Oh,
He's the reason why the whole back and to the left thing came about, and people started questioning the official story of Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone. They released it on Geraldo Rivera's television show in '75, so it was 13 years after the assassination.
Well, since then, people who've seen the film merge it with their memory of that day, and they think that they actually saw it in real time, which was absolutely impossible. And there are lots of examples like this, and I just know personally, like your buddies, I think I have a great memory until I have to fact check my books, or until readers point out things that I never bothered to fact check because they were so obvious. And then I realized, oh my God, I have a clear memory of Ronald Reagan saying that, and he never said it.
Right.
And it is really a sobering experience to do serious fact-checking on your own writing. You realize how many of your memories were just made up there, or not made up out of whole cloth, but they're polished over time to be a more coherent story, a more satisfying story.
Right. That's the thing we do with stand-up comedy. We take a story and we kind of trim it and edit it and move it. We take like some stories have a kernel of truth and reality to them, but we, for a comedic effect, we'll twist it around.
Sure, reality's never that funny.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you get lucky. But the memory thing is unfortunate. It's unfortunate people don't have good memories and that their memories can be manipulated. And I was reading an article that someone sent to me today of a terrible case where a woman who's the author of that book, I believe it's called Lovely Bones, she was raped when she was 18, and a man was convicted who was innocent, and he was just released after many, many years of being incarcerated. And she detailed how she was kind of coached into believing that he was the one. And she actually picked the wrong person out of a lineup, and she was told by the prosecutor that that wrong person that she picked out was there as a trick to throw her off because he looked like the other guy, and they were friends. They did it on purpose. They kind of lied to her and coached her. And she was 18 and traumatized. She had just been raped, and she was convinced by these people that she had got the right guy. They used the junk science of microscopic hair samples, which has since been discredited, and this poor guy was in jail for more than a decade. I'm not sure exactly.
No, that's right. And to her credit, she recanted and she expressed remorse for her role in falsely convicting him.
I mean,
it's a heartbreaking story. I mean, all around.
It's horrible, right?
A horrible story.
She's 18, right? When you're 18, we were talking about like, someone planting memories in your head, especially when you've had this horrific, traumatic event happen to you. You've been raped, and you think they got the guy, and they're convincing you. These are adults. They're convincing you that this is the guy.
Yeah, no, and it's bad if you've been traumatized. It's bad if you're 18, but it happens even when you're not traumatized, and even when you're 35, 45, 55.
Yes,
It's another issue that I talk about in Irrationality, where I have a chapter on what's psychologists call signal detection theory, also called statistical decision theory, which is if none of us is infallible. We all have to rely on noisy signals from the world, and we're never completely sure whether they indicate reality or whether they're, as we say, in the noise. So you got to have a cutoff. You have to say, well, if my confidence is above a certain level, I'll make one decision, like convict in a criminal trial. If it's below it, I'll acquit. And so there are two things going on in this kind of decision. One is, how good is the signal? That is, how good are your forensics? How reliable are your instruments? And the other is, where do you put your cutoff? Are you going to be trigger happy? Are you going to be gun shy? Are you going to say yes a lot of the time? Are you going to say no a lot of the time? And that isn't a question of fact. That's a question of value. How bad is it if I get it wrong in either direction? That is, how bad is it if I miss something that's really out there? How bad is it if I have a false alarm to something that isn't out there? And those are two parts of the decision process, and people sometimes confuse them. So you have people saying, well, the way to deal with crime on the streets is to put more bad people behind bars. The way to deal with terrorism is we've got to monitor social media and arrest people before they can commit rampage shootings or acts of terrorism. We've got to believe more accusers. The thing is, if all you're doing is you're changing your cutoff, saying, I'm going to be satisfied with less evidence before I pull the trigger and say guilty, yeah, you're going to convict more guilty people, and you're also going to convict more innocent people. That's just mathematics. The way to satisfy the ideal of convicting more guilty people but not falsely convicting innocent people is your forensics have to get better. And our forensics, a lot of our forensics, you mentioned hair analysis, which are contrary to what you see on CSI. A lot of the forensic techniques are close to worthless.
Yeah.
And people get falsely convicted. I mean, DNA is the most reliable, and that's shown that a lot of people are in jail for crimes they didn't convict.
Yeah, my friend Josh Dubin, a good friend of mine who works with the Innocence Project, I've had him on a few times, and recently had him on with a gentleman who was falsely accused and spent a long time in jail for that. And he has a podcast that he runs on junk science. Things like bite marks.
Yes, right.
It's just not reliable at all.
Ballistics. Cut marks from tools. What bolt cutters actually went through this chain. The thing is that, I kind of rediscovered this myself when I went to a talk at Harvard by the FBI's expert in linguistic analysis, because I study language. How do you tell, who wrote the ransom note based on choice of words, their systematics? And I realized this is the top FBI guy. It was based on kind of hunches and folklore. They did not do any statistical analysis to prove that it actually worked. And it's kind of shocking when you look at the science behind a lot of our forensics, how unscientific.
Handwriting analysis is fairly accurate, though, right?
Well, if it comes to identifying who wrote a note, if it comes from divining someone's character from the way they write.
Oh, that's nonsense.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's astrology.
That's astrology, right.
But to be able to tell whether or not someone wrote a ransom note, they're pretty good at that, right?
Good question. I don't want to say not knowing the answer.
Yeah, I won't say it either.
Yeah.
But it's
a lot of them aren't so good. So we have in the criminal justice system, we have what's sometimes called Blackstone's ratio. That after a 18th century British jurist who said, better that 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person be convicted.
Yes.
Now that's a moral decision. That's not a matter of accuracy or knowledge. And I think it's a good, not a bad rule. But that's signal detection theory is combining that kind of thinking, like how bad is the error of a false acquittal or a false conviction, which is a moral question. Combine that with how good are we at telling them apart, which is a question of how good our forensics are.
My concern when it comes to this sort of inevitable connection of human beings to technology, I think it's just a matter of time before we become symbiotic, before we're kind of already, we're connected at the hip to our cell phones, but I think it's a matter of time before we get something that is more reliable than the human memory. And I have a real concern is that one day we're going to all be required to be chipped because this is the only way to get a full HD version of what you did during the day. And it shouldn't bother you if you're innocent. It's the same idea of like the NSA spying, like with what Edward Snowden revealed, and so many people were horrified by it, and some of the other people were like, what difference does it make if you're not doing anything wrong? Like, well, you're missing the point. Because human beings having that kind of power to look into other human beings' lives are almost always going to abuse it. And if we do come to a point in time someday where we say, listen, there are, thousands of innocent people convicted every year and sent to, probably more than that, sent to jails for crimes they didn't commit, we can stop all of that. We can stop all that through these chips. Just
by chips, you mean like everyone wears Google Glass?
I mean,
or do you mean
like
actually
Neuralink.
Oh, yeah.
Like that kind of deal.
I tend to be more skeptical of that, but the same problem arises if, everyone's wearing, Google Glass and has
Yes.
a 24/7 video record of everything they do.
Yeah, but you could take it off.
Yeah, right.
The chip is there.
Well, in 1984, with a telescreen in every room,
Yes.
it was a crime to turn off the telescreen.
Wow, so might be headed in that direction.
Yeah, I don't know, but I tend to be more skeptical than Neuralink. Not that it's, physically impossible, but, brains are pretty complex.
Yeah.
And we're nowhere near that level of specificity, and I suspect we never will be. Just 'cause
Really?
Yeah, I think.
So you have no faith whatsoever in AI being sentient?
So this is separate from say neural implants, like
Right.
interfaces with your brain tissue.
Do you have the faith that we will be able to recreate what a brain does?
Down to the last synapse, I doubt it. I mean, it's not that it's impossible, but it is kind of gargantuan on a scale that we can barely imagine.
Have you ever talked to Kurzweil about this?
Oh yeah.
What, so obviously he has a different opinion. He
Yes,
thinks
he does.
that we are going to be able to by, I believe his guesstimate is 2045.
Yeah, I know, but he keeps post-dating it.
I wonder why.
Yeah, right.
I had a really interesting conversation with him for this sci-fi show. We talked for like over an hour, and at the end of it, one of the weirder parts about it is that what he is trying to do is to get to a point where he can have a conversation with his father.
His dead father.
His dead father.
Yeah.
He thinks that he, through memories and through whatever recordings he has and photographs he has, will be able to replicate his father's personality to a significant or sufficient extent where he can actually have a conversation with him. You talk to his dead father.
Yeah. I think he could. He could. If the father wrote a lot of correspondence. We already have AI that can kind of fake new text in the style of existing text.
That's weird,
but,
man.
Although I think it's pretty unsatisfying. I would not consider that to be having a conversation with my dead father.
No, if I had,
I wouldn't want to. For one thing, I wouldn't want to be fooled in that way.
No, I just like that. I would find no comfort in that. Like, I have very good friends that have died, and if I had the ability to email a fake version of my very good friend that died and get like a response that's very similar to what they would say, that would mean nothing to me.
Exactly. No, that's really right. See, that it's another interesting part of our psychology. We have this sense of, is something real or not? That sometimes, is it really connected to the person that we know and love? And it makes a big psychological difference, even if you can't tell the difference. It's like, there are lots of examples, and this is from my former collaborator, Paul Bloom. Someone paid a lot of money for John F. Kennedy's golf clubs. Now, if it turned out that they weren't John F. Kennedy's golf clubs, if they were just some other guy's golf clubs from the late 50s and early 60s, it would be worth a fraction of the amount, and it would be emotionally much less satisfying,
Right.
even if they're the same golf clubs.
Yeah.
But just knowing that there is that personal connection makes a big psychological difference.
Yeah, it means a lot to people. If you could get some sort of an artifact from a historic figure. I've got a letter from Hunter S. Thompson that he wrote to someone that I have framed in my office in L.A. And it's just like, I look at it every now and then. I'm like, he really wrote that. Like, his fucking hands wrote on that piece of paper, and it's right there. And it's very valuable to me because of that weird reason.
Absolutely. And even though you could not tell the difference,
Yeah.
and the same with great paintings versus excellent forgeries, we do have a sense of real stuff that really was in contact with other people, with real events.
Yeah. The real paintings versus forgeries things has always freaked me out. There was a documentary about this one gentleman who was a master at recreating the style of the masters. Like, he was really good at, like, he could make a fake Picasso, he could make a fake Rembrandt, and he was making these paintings and selling them for spectacular amounts of money. And they were really good paintings, but they were bullshit.
Right.
But it's not bullshit. It's like, it's so weird. It's because, like, the painting is a real painting, and it's really good.
No, that's right.
And it was in the style of these people, and people loved the paintings, but they loved it because it was a Rembrandt or because it was a Picasso.
It's sometimes called, the fancy word for it is Hecate, Heccity. It's from Latin, meaning kind of thisness. That is the sense of above and beyond what it looks like, whether it can fool you, just the knowledge that this is the thing.
Yeah.
And we're sensitive to it. That's the way our minds work.
Well, it is. It's very strange. And sometimes we like it if it's like I went to see the Rolling Stones 2 weeks ago. It was amazing.
Minus Charlie Watts.
Yeah, minus Charlie Watts, unfortunately. But it was amazing. I felt like I was stone sober for the first 20 minutes until I started drinking. But I felt like I was on a drug, looking at Mick Jagger on stage, like dancing around and singing, and I was like, I can't believe he's real.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's really him. But there's something about that real experience of being in the presence of that real guy that's incredible. But then there's some people that are really good at cover bands.
Right, sure. Elvis impersonators,
Yeah.
Beatles cover bands, and
Well, how about the guy who plays lead singer for Journey now?
oh yes, right.
Do you know the deal? Like, Steve Perry retired, but Journey still tours with this other
With an
fella.
impersonator?
Yes, but he doesn't look anything like him.
Sounds
But he
like him.
sounds amazingly like him. He's really good. This is the fella. He's is he from Vietnam or Filipino? Right? Filipino? Yeah. And you just play a version of his song because it's so good. You have to hear it because it's so good. It'll freak you out. Here it goes. So this guy was apparently. I mean, it's dead on. I mean, dead on.
I saw the Wailers a couple of summers ago with a Bob Marley impersonator.
Whoa.
And he was pretty good.
That one I have a problem with.
Yeah.
You know, like, not taking anything away from Steve Perry, but Bob Marley was a cultural enigma. I mean, he was something bigger than just a musician.
Yeah, that's true. And he was, a beautiful man. And
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't the same as seeing Bob Marley.
Right, of course.
It was a different kind of experience,
Yeah.
but still enjoy. And also, it's there probably was so much turnover in the band itself. I doubt that any original Wailer was still playing.
Right.
It's got what they call in philosophy the ship of Theseus, after the ship where every plank gets replaced.
Yes.
And so after a few years, not a single atom remains of the original. Is it the same ship or not?
Right. That's a real thing, right? Because they've done recreations or reconstructions of certain boats, and that's how they've done it.
Yeah. And of course, each one of us is a ship of Theseus because our atoms turn over.
Yeah.
And we like to think we're the same people that we were 7 or 8 years ago.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you're literally not the same human you were 7 years ago.
Well, you are the same human, but you're not the same hunk of matter.
Well, okay, so where are your memories stored then?
So your memories, so the thing is that your synapses don't turn over. That
Right.
is the actual connections between brain cells in which memories are stored and the patterns of interconnections. So even as the molecules turn over, they have the same connectivity pattern.
Well, we already know that those memories are terrible anyway.
Well, there is some, yes, they can be kind of edited after. They are kind of like Wikipedia stories
Yeah.
where anyone can edit them.
Well, the real problem with memory sometimes is when you repeat a story so many times you don't even remember the real story.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what happens with a lot of these false convictions because the prosecutor keeps asking the witness, are you sure? And the more they ask them, are you sure? The more sure they are
Right.
whether they originally were or not. Yeah, but absolutely, yeah. Elizabeth Loftus, the pioneer in this research, has compared our memories to Wikipedia entries. That is, anyone can edit them after the fact.
Very few people even know how vulnerable people's memories are to being manipulated that way. That someone can easily introduce a false memory into your mind.
Yeah. And they often increase coherence because a lot of our lives are more random than we like to think. They're not like scripted plots where we actually pursue a goal. If you actually had a record of what you did in any given day, there are a lot of things you forgot what you were doing. You went here, and it wasn't really a very smart thing to do. But then you like to present yourself to the world as someone who lives his life with a plan, who can be trusted, whose word is good, and so we retrospectively edit our lives to make our lives more coherent, to make them seem more like a scripted story with a protagonist and a goal and a climax and a denouement. And so our memories are always much more satisfying as stories than the reality. That's why, by the way, I once read an interview with Susan Estrich, who was a political consultant, but before that she was a criminal defense lawyer. She said the reason that we all are familiar with those the courtroom shows where the defense lawyer, first thing they tell their client is, shut up, don't say anything to the police that you don't, until you're under oath, or I'll answer for you. The reason isn't that people lie. The reason is that people will retrospectively make their memories more coherent than they really were. And then that means that they'll talk themselves into a lie, which then the prosecutor can use to impugn their credibility. Well, you said the following 7 things, under oath, and we can show that number 2 and number 5 never happened. So anything you say, we're going to treat now as a lie. And it wasn't that they were trying to fool anyone; they were just trying to make themselves seem, like sensible humans who did things for a good reason.
Well, there's also situations where you have a prosecutor that's unscrupulous and all they want to do is catch you lying, and then they could prosecute you for perjury.
Exactly.
That's happened to many people that were actually innocent of the initial crime they were trying to be convicted of, but then they made false statements to the FBI.
Oh, absolutely. And we're sitting ducks for that because we all lie. I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's the estimate is every person tells 2 lies a day on average.
Jamie tells 3. That's what I heard. No.
But, we do, and not necessarily for nefarious reasons. It may not be to pull the wool over someone's eyes. It's just that we want to seem like sensible humans, and none of us are as sensible as we'd like to be.
And sometimes we just want to get to the point. We just want to cut out some nonsense. So we'll just
Exactly. Yeah, we tell a
make
good
something
story.
up.
So
That's I was late. Sorry. Instead of saying what actually happened, come up with some cockamamie. Yeah, it's the thing about the idea of a digital memory is that it's something that they're working on. It's something they do believe that within our lifetimes they're going to be able to achieve some way of a visual interpretation of what you're experiencing that can be either downloaded or shared or at least examined for veracity. Like, say if you have an idea of what happened and there's some sort of a criminal situation, there will be a time in our lifetimes where they'll be able to tell.
Well, we already have in many cities, and this was true in England for a while, where there's basically closed-circuit cameras on every street corner. You can't.
Camden, New Jersey, it's filled with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it hasn't led to 1984 in England. And
Fortunately.
Right, at least not,
For
at least
now.
not so far.
Yeah.
And there could be an argument that it does lead to safer streets and fewer false convictions, and
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like there's a trade-off.
there's a trade-off. Yeah.
Yeah, there's pros and cons. You have a lack of privacy and an erosion of your privacy, but you also have this possibility that someone who could be convicted, and that has happened, right? They have, look, this Kyle Rittenhouse verdict that came down. There's many people that had a very distorted idea of what actually took place that day, and then through the trial, we got to see what had actually happened. Many people did not know that someone had actually pulled a gun on him and that they had attacked him and knocked him to the ground. When you get to see it and see when he actually shot them, it changes the whole narrative.
Yeah, and there are other cases like some of the police shootings we never would have known about if there weren't cell phone cameras. The Boston Marathon bombers, the Tsarnaev brothers, caught on camera. So yeah, there is a trade-off. I tend to think that the fears that people have after reading 1984, that if you have better technology, that is the slippery slope towards totalitarianism. My own feeling is that tends to be overblown, that you can have some technologically pretty crude countries that are just horrible places to live, because the government can always tap into ordinary conversations, gossip networks. If people really are planning something, they talk to other people. They can use friends and relatives against each other. And there's some kind of tin pot third world dictatorships that are pretty terrifying places with really crude technology. And then there are places like Scandinavia and England where the technology is pretty advanced, but they haven't turned into 1984.
But then you have places like China.
Well, that's true, yes.
Where the technology is very advanced, and they've done some very disturbing things like this social credit score system that people in America that are, staunch advocates for personal liberty are very concerned that something like that is going to make its way in some sort of an innocuous form here, that some social credit score thing will be something that we implement, and then before you know it, like there was an article really recently where they were saying that your actual credit score in terms of ability to borrow money, could be affected by your browser history.
Your browser history, yeah.
Did you see that?
No, I didn't. It's not implausible unless there's some regulation.
It was a new. You find the article. It was on Yahoo, and the way they were framing it was so insidious, because they were framing it essentially like you could be able to borrow more money if we can look at your browser history. So they were saying that essentially, if you're a good guy, we could check your browser history, and maybe you'd be eligible for more money.
Yeah.
Or maybe if you're some guy who wants to Google some naughty things about Joe Biden or some naughty things about Kamala Harris or how did Nancy Pelosi get all that money? Hey, maybe you're a fucking problem and you don't really need a house, buddy.
Well, yeah, and it wouldn't take much artificial intelligence to find patterns in people's browsing history.
Right.
That would predict all kinds of stuff.
Well, those poor QAnon folks. One of the QAnon folks that was in that documentary, they were staunch Obama supporters. They were staunch Democrats. And then something happened. And, they got radicalized and they that happens all the time to people, right? Like people that were hardcore left-wing people switch over to the right, or hardcore right-wing people switch over to the left. And then they find this new ideology and it's kind of exciting. It's like breaking up with your wife and you get this new wife and all of a sudden, you got new problems and everything, but you got it, everything's new and exciting. You got big smile. What's going on, George? Well, I'm remarried. Got a new wife, new life, everything's great. And that's kind of what they're doing. They switch ideologies, and this new ideology becomes exciting.
Well, and it is true that there are certain patterns of thinking, like conspiratorial thinking, that you can find on the left and on the right.
Oh, yeah.
There was a Washington Post survey recently that showed that 9 out of 10 Americans believe in at least one conspiracy theory.
Do you believe in any?
I hope not. I don't think so.
You don't believe in any conspiracy theories? What about Enron? That's a conspiracy that's real.
I guess it depends on what you call a conspiracy theory.
Well, a bunch of people conspiring to do something nefarious.
I do believe people act in concert, sometimes in secret. So in that sense, yes. But in terms of ones that kind of defy conventional understanding and involve considerable amounts of cooperation and conspiracy across a wide range, in opposition to constituencies that have an interest in maintaining the truth, which is what we tend to call conspiracy theories. Then when I took the Washington Post survey, I didn't believe any of them.
What people that have an interest in maintaining the truth,
or discovering the truth, yeah.
So saying that conspiracies that are maintained by people that actually have an interest in maintaining and discovering the truth.
When you've got some means, when you've got kind of checks and balances where there are people who have a vested interest in advancing some goal, and there are also people who have a vested interest in stopping them, where they don't have completely free reign, where there are journalists, where there are members of the other political party, where there are people just doing their jobs, where just so many people would have to be acting together who ordinarily would have conflicting interests.
Give me an example of one of those kind of theories.
Well, let's say did the CIA deliberately release the HIV virus in order to sterilize African Americans? That's a conspiracy.
What? Is that a real one?
It's a real.
I've never even heard that one.
Oh yeah, it's
How did HIV? It doesn't sterilize people though.
No, nor was it deliberately engineered. But that's a conspiracy theory on the left.
Right.
So many people would have to be in cahoots.
Yeah.
Without anyone actually, blowing the cover.
That's that's not a very popular one. I've never heard that one before.
It's actually widespread in some African American communities.
Have you heard of that, Jamie? Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Jeffrey Epstein was murdered.
You don't think he's murdered?
I don't think he was murdered.
Really?
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, it's just a simpler theory that he would. He had every reason to kill himself. He had the means. I think it's much easier to believe that a bunch of prison staff were incompetent than that they actually were willing to risk imprisonment for a goal that they probably couldn't have meant a whole lot to them.
But not just incompetent, but the cameras were shut off. The cameras that were supposed to be monitoring his area were shut off.
I mean, low-paid civil servants can do all kinds of incompetent things.
Low-paid civil servants can also be bribed.
They can, but it would have to be an awful lot of people who are bribed, and and bribed by who, and how, and could that secret really have been kept by so many people?
But that forensic scientists have studied his autopsy and concluded that the ligature marks around his neck and the placement of them and the wound, the way the damage to his vertebrae, the bones that are in his neck, is not consistent with hanging, but is consistent with being strangled because of the positioning of where the choke marks were. When you hang, usually it's higher up because the force of gravity. When you have something tight around your neck, the force of gravity raises it up to where your neck is, meeting your chin. He was strangled down low, which is usually what happens if someone gets behind you and chokes you to death.
I mean, it wasn't what. Okay, so I mean,
there's a fracture of the bones in his neck that's consistent with strangulation. Dr. Michael Baden, who's a leading forensic scientist, who's the guy who used to be on that HBO show Autopsy, who's worked on thousands of criminal cases. His conclusion was it was a homicide.
The last one that I read seemed to suggest it was perfectly compatible with.
Was that the Hillary Clinton news?
No.
Who printed that one?
This is in. I think it was in the Washington Post.
Yeah,
but of course, he wasn't. It wasn't like he was on the gallows where there was a floor that fell away and then he suddenly had his neck snapped.
But still, to be strangled by a rope, you need gravity. And if you're going to have gravity and it's going to be around your neck, that means your body's going to sink down and your neck is not. Yeah, if that happens, the rope usually it